Going back to the beginning, when did music start for you? And was it part of your childhood? Was it around your household? How did it all kind of begin?
Do you know, it makes me think of the fact that music begins in utero in a way, because you're just born listening to a heartbeat. So it sort of makes sense to me that one's life is informed in some ways by that. But sorry, I hope that doesn't sound a bit kind of, I think, and I'm a twin as well, so I've always had that sense of company as well. Aside from heartbeats, I grew up in a musical home. My mum was head of music at a school in Edinburgh called Wester Hales Education Centre, and there was always music in the house, and like there was either classical like manuscripts and mainly classical records, and we had like two second-hand pianos, and both, I remember one had like a D that didn't work and the other one had a G that didn't work. So it's almost like you'd have to play a verse on one and like run to the other to get the chorus or something. And I didn't think I was going to do music as a job. So I ended up on my degree, which was kind of like, shit, I better do something. Because I'd done like a pattern cutting course for a year, and then I did biochemistry. And then I left in second year when I met the One Dove guys, and we were doing like overnight sessions in this studio called Toad Hall Studios in Glasgow.
It was there in Glasgow where Dot's music career really began, forming the band One Dove and working with longtime collaborator, DJ and producer, Andrew Weatherall.
I basically became obsessed with a set of chords that I took and played them on cassette. I played it to Jim on cassette, and that set of chords became our first single, which we put out on Soma in Glasgow and pressed a white label, like I think it's 1,000 copies, and then that became the song that got us signed and everything. We went to Rimini to hear it being played by the Slam DJs on a deck for the first time, and I was saying earlier, this is my life with these dogs just harassing me constantly. Heard it played on decks for the first time, which was like mind blowing, because it's like obviously kind of like such a huge moment, really. And then that night, Andrew Weatherall had been there, and the band and him sort of hung out and stuff. And I arranged, he asked me to send him a copy of that song when we got back to the UK. So I did. And then he phoned one day and just said, quote unquote, only fucking record of the year. And that was it. That was it. And then he said, I want to sign you guys to Boyzone Records. Yeah. And then we put out an album, and that's how that happened. And the rest it's gone from there.
And after One Dove, you decided to become solo. So how was that experience for you?
Yeah, it was hard. It was hard because I was kind of like, I think as a twin, I kind of like kind of collaboration actually quite a lot, and but I was fine, and I just decided I started writing. So I wrote an album, and I think it took me a couple of albums in to fully find my sound, I think. But I think I just made music how I wanted to and when I wanted to, and I wasn't thinking success. I wasn't thinking, kind of, I don't know, people getting returns on investments or anything like that. I was just like it was really important to me to make a record that I felt comfortable with, sort of thing. Yeah.
It was here during her time as a solo artist that Dot had started collaborating with the likes of Massive Attack, Pete Doherty, and Paul Weller.
How do you think these experiences affected your approach to music and music making?
Well, I think anything that you do, any music you make is going to be a learning curve, and I think you're going to get closer to finding your voice creatively and honing your process, whatever that is. And I think it's weird. It's like when you write a song, sometimes it's only when you play it to someone that you hear it in a different way, and you're like, shit, I need to finish. Oh God, that's not right, or whatever. And I think it's the same with collaboration. Like, I feel for me personally, it's taken me quite a long time to find my own voice in terms of my process. So it's like I now look back and think, oh God, you were kind of scratching the surface a bit, but I didn't realize that I had quite a lot more to kind of, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it's almost like you finish before the song is finished, if you know what I mean. But then as time goes on, you become more selective and then more kind of analytical about it. And you're kind of, I suppose you're kind of your sort of personal sort of patrol on what's reached its summit changes, if that makes any sense. And I guess it is for everyone. It's probably a bit of a lifelong process, that. But if I'm playing something, it's almost only once I've exposed it to the outside world that I go, oh, that's not quite finished yet. It's weird. It's like it's a sort of it's like a sort of awakening to, I don't know, it's hard. It's really hard to describe, but I think you have to go through that process where you have to sort of expose your soft underbelly of your ideas to people, and then kind of live through the kind of inevitable rejections of some of them. And then I think the people that have the capacity to self-reflect and go, and to sort of look that in the eye and go, where did that not quite work? That's when you can grow. But it's a painful process sometimes, So I hope I'm at a stage where I've sort of done a bit of that, if that makes sense, where you kind of, I guess it's just your standard gets higher for what you will settle for from yourself, and calling it, that's where that can go to, if that makes sense, yeah.
After a 10-year-long hiatus, Dot returned in 2021, taking a more acoustic, organic approach to her music with her 5th solo album, Heart-Shaped Scars.
I think because I went off and became a mum, and I did have a studio. Like, I've had studios. I mean, I learned in my flat in London on a little LC3 and Cubase and ADATs and a tiny little 16-channel Spirit Audio desk. And I've memories of like crawling around underneath a DDA desk, cursing, trying to find the right wire to put in the back of the desk and stuff. So I ended up kind of having this need to kind of strip back. And I think it was starting to happen before I took time off anyway. It was almost like it all felt quite overwhelming, I think, just with tons of outboard gear and synths and stuff. So it was like a conscious, unconscious sort of, I don't know, it's weird. It was like I had to regroup with myself about how I wanted to work, because the only reason I ever tried to, delved into like a bit of engineering and a bit of production was more of a needs must to be able to multi-track and get the ideas down. It wasn't like that was my thing, if you know what I mean. So, but then when I after I'd had this massive break, I mean, it was such a long time that all of the software had changed anyway. So like, I just picked up a ukulele and a guitar, and I thought, actually what I want to really focus on is not the process of finessing and finishing something, but getting the absolute heart and the core of the composition magical. And then I'll think about that, if you know what I mean. So I decided to work on the actual craft of songwriting and really nail the song before. And this is as a solo singer-songwriter rather than a film and TV composer, which I've done one. I mean, I've been commissioned to do one TV show with Anton Newcombe called Annika, which stars Nicola Walker. But that's before that, it was more like needle drop source, guesting on things and making my own solo albums. So yeah, it was just about getting the song right. That's why I stripped it back. And then I've never fully got back into kind of looking at, kind of improving my production. I quite like to work with someone with mixing and engineering, but yeah.
In your music, there seems to be a feature of using voice not to just convey lyrics, but also as an instrument or a set of instruments you would find in a chamber band almost. What's your kind of like process behind that? Do you care to comment on it?
Yeah, I don't think I ever saw myself as this like really sort of, I don't know, traditional singer in a way. I saw myself more as a vocalist in a way. And I think even from the very first days working with Andrew Weatherall, I remember singing on a song which is called My Friend on the One Dove album. And it was literally just like walls of harmony and kind of just doing something completely kind of different and choral and just giving him that. And then he took a couple of lines from that. But even then I realized it was kind of like, I feel like it's like painting with your voice rather than, I don't know, it's hard to describe, but it's just like, it's like layering things up and using it almost like you're touching something up, but with a voice. That's how I've sang quite a lot of my songs. And then it's interesting because after the break, when I sat down and started just working on the craft of the song itself, I sing more in that traditional way when I've written like that. But I just like to be completely open-minded about how you can use a voice, and that there are no rules, and it has to be an expression of something. You don't start off with a sort of like, I don't know, what's the review and work backwards kind of thing. It's got to be, for me anyway, it's a sort of an energetic kind of expression of feeling. And that can have lyrics, but it doesn't have to. It can be just, to me, it can be just as emotive, sort of clusters of harmonies and things that can kind of make you cry. And, I think I've always wanted to have that expressiveness in whatever way. It doesn't really matter to me in a way. Yeah.
She then released Consciousology in 2023, which leads us to now, where Dot has captured her voice for us all. For the sample library, Dot Allison, Dulcet Voice.
So doing a sample library is a big step. Were there any fears you had other than the slightly more forensic way you had to record?
It was a bit nerve-wracking because, like, I don't view myself as any kind of session singer, so it's like you can kind of get away with having quite a kind of fractured voice, which is part of its charm. I think I just slightly kind of stressed it on tour in America, and all of these little kind of, it's a bit of sort of like scar tissue on your voice can give it that really airy, textural kind of, I don't know, a bit heartbreaky vibe, I think, maybe a bit haunting. So yeah, the upside of that is that you get that sound, but then the downside of that is that sometimes, your voice is slightly kind of quirky. So I was a little bit nervous about that, but and I just thought I feel like it's a nice stage of my own career to go, actually, I'll share that, I'll just share it, and it'll, it's just it's something I maybe wouldn't have done early on. Do you know what I mean? And then I also, from a slightly selfish point of view, I like the idea of having it kind of arrested in time a wee bit as well, because it changes all the time, my voice. I think, well, any voice, but it's funny how it's sort of, even in 6 months, I can hear it being a bit more reedy or a bit more like a flute or something. And yeah, so it's quite nice to just have it arrested and sort of like a photograph of your voice in a way.
How did you approach this library, and what did you want to achieve and avoid?
I suppose I wanted it to not just be like, I don't know, like too many other libraries. And I saw it at the very beginning. I just saw it being in sections, which has changed a little bit since then. But it was like notes, refrains, and inventions. And so it's funny how an idea evolves over time as well. So it was just capturing the tonality and the timbre and everything of just the notes, the sustained notes, but then also being able to add in some little kind of, motifs and refrains and staccato notes that you can kind of, I don't know, create a kind of pointillistic mosaic with or something if you wanted. Or and I suppose everything's like a wee fingerprint. There's no two refrains that are going to be the same on anything, but even in my own library as well. So it's just kind of, I don't know, it's just that sort of variation throughout it, trying to keep that sort of in mind. And then I designed the user interface as well and hand drew the whole thing. So hopefully it's pleasant to look at and hear. Yeah.
Will you be using this on your next project?
Yeah, I will. I think it's always been in my mind to do that. Yeah, and it'll be lovely to kind of, like, going back to that thing of using it like an instrument, and just, I suppose, that being able to do it like sort of dexterously with your all these shapes and motifs that it just will inspire, I think, differently than if I'm standing in front of a microphone trying to visualize the whole thing or something, you know what I mean? So, yeah, I think that'll be really good. That'll be interesting. Yeah.